Hey everyone, welcome to BrickVault. Today is another LEGO Top 10 MOCs of the Week episode where I show you the coolest custom creations that I happen to see people building in LEGO throughout this last week. Links to all of the designers that I show today are listed in the description below, and there's no order of best to worst, but now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like all the newer designers that I've more recently discovered I'm going to be putting towards the front of the videos, just so they get slightly more exposure. They're all listed in the description below. Once again, they're Flickr links, and I highly recommend you check out more of the stuff that these guys are building because we got some amazing creations that came out this last week. Now, like always, let me just show you guys the custom build that went up in our web store. From the designer Space Brick, we have the Winter Grocer. It's built in a style that is compatible with the rest of the Winter Village LEGO sets, yet it's just a bit more detailed, and personally I think it's got quite a bit of character. You can click the link in the description below if you want to see more. I highly recommend you check out the interior that has a LEGO hobby room. Now let's jump into the very first build of the week. We are starting big. This is, I think, the biggest build that I'm showing off this week from Sebastian. It is simply titled Favela. The designer says it took 2.5 months to put this thing together, and that doesn't surprise me at all. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if it took a bit longer. They say that they just kind of took all the random, old, scuffed up, bite mark LEGO pieces they had and just sort of made a mishmash smorgasbord of what looks like a cyberpunk-esque, maybe even kind of reminds me of Judge Dredd almost, but Lego-ified version of a large, low-income, futuristic neighborhood. I guess that's the way I'm describing it. It harkens back to so many different sci-fi worlds. I absolutely love it. It's kind of Blade Runner-y. It also feels a little bit like The Fifth Element. Cyberpunk 2077, the video game, comes to mind, even though it's not out yet. And honestly, I think it's just awesome. There's a wonderful combination of colors, but not too colorful. It still definitely feels very grungy. And for someone who says they just used a bunch of random pieces, I can see a lot of very high quality, intentional bits of detailing that really bring this whole area to life. The next two designs come from a builder that I don't believe I've shown any builds from before in the past. This first one from Tino Poutianen is the Sukhoi Su-30 MK1. This is an experimental fighter from the game Ace Combat 7, and technically the original version of this model was built a couple years ago, but he just recently reposted it with a stand, so I've discovered it just now, and it's probably one of the single best MIDI scale fighters that I've ever seen. Even on larger scale builds, airplane wings don't look as good as how they do right now. Granted, the model looks relatively delicate, but this is a perfect example of how creating small, delicate connections with bricks can truly enhance the angles and proportions of the subject that you're trying to put together. The slow arch upward going towards the cockpit looks really organic, and even on this smaller scale, the rounded over bricks in the back capture a wonderful shape. I highly recommend you check out this guy's Flickr if you want to see other very highly detailed, wonderfully shaped MIDI scale models like this. And then I almost never do this, but I discovered these two different builds on two different searches at two different times, not realizing they're from the same guy, so I decided to include the number 3 build is also from Tino, but it was actually just built a couple days ago, so this one is relevant to a build from this last week. It's called Siege Giant, and there's just something really fun about combining the medieval times with knights and castles with robots or Gundams or other giant, Bionicle type figures. Instead of giant rocket pods like you may have seen from Mech Warriors, you have two different trebuchets on the top of the shoulders, which is awesome. The giant seems to be holding a hammer of sorts, and on the back there's some interesting details like maybe some potted plants. I'm not sure why that's there, and who knows, maybe the giant has been injured because you can see a little bit of blood pouring out the back by his foot. Either way, wonderfully creative build, and this was submitted to Anthony Wilson's Bionic Castle contest, so that actually makes a lot of sense. And speak of the devil, that's the next build coming up. Coming from Anthony Wilson, we have Valkyrie Tau of Lightning. In terms of a robotic figure, this one certainly looks a bit more advanced, technologically speaking. There's a lot of awesome shapes here that I'm a big fan of. Personally, I think the toes by the feet, just the general build for the feet, look amazing. I love those proportions. The screw-shaped gear that sticks out the back of the leg is a wonderful detail. It feels like, it kind of looks like a spring, and it gives you the impression that this robotic figure can probably run very fast, maybe jump. Looks pretty dynamic, and the 4 sensors or the 4 eyes on the head look kind of intimidating. This is definitely a robot that captures a lot of energy, no pun intended, all the lightning pieces everywhere, but really it does look quite animated, and if you were to encounter a bad guy like this in a video game, I'm sure he wouldn't be easy to defeat. Speaking of defeat, we have Knockout from vir-a-cocha. This design has been making the rounds on several different forums, and for a good reason. It's a simple yet elegant scene of a boxing victory with the champion raising his glove in the air. The build for the boxer figure is simple-ish looking, but all the relevant details are there, and the picture composition is just a wonderful scene with the feet of the defeated boxer laying flat on his back. Not a ton of bricks were used for this piece, but at the end of the day, it is very, very effective. Now, Kale Frost has used a ton of pieces for this Santa head model. I think it's just simply titled Santa, and I like this one a lot. It's not too often that you see what looks like to be a full life-size head of a human face built out of Lego bricks, and whenever something like this is attempted, it's both impressive but also a little bit creepy. I don't know how to describe it. What works in the builder's favor is Santa's bushy beard. I really like the build style that was used to create those shapes, and the inclusion of those wing pieces to make white bushy eyebrows was also a really fun touch. When you see it here in a mall display, it does definitely add to the creepiness just because some of those body proportions are so out of whack. Oh man, that actually does really creep me out. But either way, the build for the head I really, really like, and you should definitely check out Kale Frost's Flickr because he's got some amazing creations of all different types of varieties. Now next up is a build from Thorsten Bonsch. This is the Shrieking Shack from Harry Potter. This model has an interesting simplicity to it. There are only a few different colors used on the outside, not a lot of dirtying details, but instead the decrepit nature of this shack is almost exclusively known just by the way those little tiles have been placed. A few of them are a little bit mismatched, and enough of them seem a bit out of whack to let you know that this is certainly a place that doesn't look like anybody's living here and probably is haunted. As you can see the pictures circling around the Shrieking Shack, there is a weird and interesting shape captured from this model. It's very accurate to what you see from the films, and even more so when you look at some of the concept art. Because this is such a weird, haunted, decrepit place, the architecture somewhat reflects that, and the whole thing just feels very unsettling. I think Thorsten Bonsch did an excellent job by making the elements on the outside relatively simple so you can focus on the strange and interesting shape that is the Shrieking Shack. Now we're getting to the last three. This is from Jeremy Williams. It's called Raptor Fighter Bomber. And not only do we have a wonderful futuristic kind of hover fighter bomber ship, but I'm a big fan of the rocket propelled detailing coming out of one of the pods on the side. At first, when I saw all the different colors of those little popcorn pieces, I thought this may have been a digital render, but I think those actually all exist in those colors because this definitely looks like a real photograph, which makes the build all the more impressive. There's some subtle build design to show an intake in the back. The model feels light and quick, though the armor looks kind of thick for something like this. It really does feel very militaristic and not too fantastical when it comes to a sci-fi design. If I saw a digital rendering of something that looked pretty darn close to this in a movie, I think it would be a really, really cool vehicle, and I think it would fit within a realistic universe quite well. And if you like sci-fi builds and spaceships and stuff, you'll definitely enjoy the scenes that come from this builder. Next we have BrickinNick's Luigi from Luigi's Mansion 3. This one is so simple. It's a nearly 2D build with just a few three-dimensional elements to make Luigi a little bit more expressive. I like that his eyebrows come a little bit in front of the front of his cap there. Of course, the teeth elements used when he's got his frightened face look nice, and it's a really, really big plus that flashlight actually turns on. It's so good. The brick pieces and connections between them all look relatively simple, at least it feels that way at a glance here, but truly this designer has vision and a very good eye for composition, so still at the end we have an amazing looking piece. This guy never stops building. I think he also does some live streaming as well, so watching some of BrickinNick's content gives you a pretty good idea as to where a builder's mind is at when they're creating something brand new. Remember, links to everybody that I'm talking about are all in the description below. I highly recommend you check them out. And now let's jump to the last build of the week. From the designer Moko, we have Exo-suit. Very simple title, not so simple build, like always from Moko. This designer is always combining system bricks with Bionicle pieces in a really interesting way. This one feels very Bionicle, at least on the Exo-suit, the outer part of the skeleton. And there you can see this little bit opening up, and there's a pilot on the inside. This robotic figure still feels like it's got a lot of energy. It's small, short, stubby, but looks quite strong. Probably could run pretty pretty fast would be my guess, and I highly recommend you check out the robotic designs that come from Moko. Now those are the top 10 for me this week. You saw a few flash by in the beginning of the episode, now you're seeing more flash by now. All of these pictures too, linked in the description below under the extras or more section, and there's a good chance that if you liked any of the stuff I showed you today, you'll probably like more stuff that I didn't have time to talk about. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. If you enjoy our content, you can always like or subscribe, and we'll see you next time at BrickVault.